Hey, what's up, y'all? Y'all good? I hope so. I hope everybody has been doing well. Hope y'all been taking care of yourselves, just taking it one day at a time, baby. Listen, I want to know, have y'all been watching House of David on Prime Video? When it first dropped, they dropped the first 3 episodes, and then after that, every episode drops on Thursday. We're up to episode 5 right now. So get down in the comments. Let me know if you've been watching it because it's good, okay? So in this review recap, what I'm going to do, I'm going to review the episode and tie in the Bible points. But what I want you to do is tell me if you like it that way or if you would prefer if I just review the episode and then come back and make a separate video tying in the Bible points, okay? Let me know what you think. So let's get into it. So the show opens in the kingdom of Israel in 1000 BC, and you see this young man walking by a brook, and he picks up a stone and puts it in his satchel. When he drops it, you can hear that he has other stones in there as well because he's going trying to find all the smooth stones. So the narrator, I'm going to pronounce her name Mikhail. I looked it up. They say you can pronounce it Mikhail, Michal, Michelle. I'm going to call her Mikhail, okay? She asks if one stone could change the course of history. She says that she's going to tell us the story of David, who was once an outcast but became one of the most famous kings. 500 years after Moses separated the sea, Israel had no king. If you go to Judges chapter 21 verse 25, it says in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. But they really wanted a king. They wanted to be like the other nations. So when you go back to the Bible in 1 Samuel chapter 8, Israel demanded a king. That's what it's titled. In 1 Samuel 8 is when the elders came to Samuel and told him that he was old and that his sons did not walk in his ways. So they wanted him to appoint them a king like the other nations. They said, give us a king to judge us. Samuel did not like this. So he praised to God. And the Lord told him, give them what they want. They've been ungrateful since the day I brought them out of Egypt. They're not rejecting you. They're rejecting me as their king. Just let them know what comes with having a king. Warn them about what all will come with that. And Samuel told them everything that will come with having a king, from the king taking their sons as horsemen. Their daughters would basically be the king's maids. He would make he would take the best of their vineyards. He will make them slaves. And that was just the beginning. But even after Samuel warned them of all of that, they still demanded a king to rule over them. Samuel took that info back to the Lord, and he told Samuel to give them what they have asked for. Then in 1 Samuel chapter 9, Saul meets Samuel, and Samuel tells him that the future of Israel is in his hands. So in 1 Samuel 9, some of his father's donkeys got lost. So he told Saul to take one of the servants and go look for them. They went all over looking for those donkeys, but they couldn't find them. And Samuel, he was ready to give up. But his servant was like, hold up, there's a man around here who is well respected because what he predicts always happens. It always comes true. So let's go ask him about the donkeys. Samuel was a little hesitant because they didn't have anything to give to the man of God. But the servant had 1/10 of an ounce of silver. So they headed to the city to see the seer, who we now call prophet. They got into the city and they saw some girls drawing water, so they asked if they could find the seer there. They said, yes, if you go up and enter the city, he'll be up there. He's up there because we're having a sacrifice today at the high place. So you should be able to catch him before he goes up there. So they hurried up to find Samuel, and as they were entering the city, Samuel was walking towards them. Because little did they know, they were supposed to be there. Everything from the donkeys going missing to his dad sending him out there to find them to the silver coin. All of that was God. In 1 Samuel 9:15 through 16, it says, the day before Saul came, the Lord revealed this to Samuel. About this time tomorrow, I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin. Appoint him to lead my people Israel. He will save my people from the Philistines. So when Samuel first saw Saul walking towards him, God said, this is the man I told you about. He will rule over my people. So Saul and his servant walked up to him and said, please tell me where the seer's house is. And Samuel responded and said, I am the seer. He told Saul to go ahead of him to the place of worship because Saul and his servant will be having dinner with him and staying overnight. He said he will answer all their questions the next day and to not worry about the 3 donkeys that they lost because they have been found. He said that soon all the wealth of Israel will belong to Saul and his family. Saul didn't believe it, and he questioned why would Samuel say such things when he was from the smallest tribe of Benjamin. Samuel ignored him and took Saul and his servant into the hall, sat them at the head of the table, served Saul the meat that was set aside for him. They ate, left the place of worship. At dawn the next day, Samuel led them to the edge of the city. He told Saul to tell his servant to go ahead of him because he needed to give Saul a message from the Lord. Then in 1 Samuel 10, Saul is anointed as king. And for 25 years, Saul reigned. The people loved him. He was undefeated in every battle, but he became very arrogant. The people started to trust more in Saul than they did God. They started saying, may the house of Saul endure forever. They started praising Saul and forgot about God. And this type of behavior created tension between God, Samuel, and Saul. Now, let's get back into the episode. And this is sort of what that first scene was, a what's to come scene. So this is what this is. So the scene takes us to the valley of Elah. This is where Saul and the Israelites camped before the battle of the Philistines. There were 200,000 Philistines out there. Sidebar. Up to this point in the Bible, when the scene at the valley of Elah with the people lined up, they're ready to battle. David had already pulled up at the battleground because his dad sent him to take some food to his brothers, because 3 of David's brothers were fighting in the battle with Saul. And Jesse, David's dad, wanted him to take them some food, check the scene, report back, let me know how everything going. When David got there, they were lining up for battle. He sees a few guys talking. He asks what was in it for the person who defeated Goliath. They told him about the reward. Then Saul overheard David talking. He called for him, and that's when David said that he could defeat Goliath. Saul was like, I don't know about that. But David told Saul about him defeating a lion and a bear. And Saul was basically like, okay, he's all yours. And that's just a quick summary. Now back to the show. So we see all these soldiers out there, and then you see Goliath walk through, and he says, how many days must we do this? And the reason he says this is because in the Bible, they had been lining up for 40 days, but they would never send anybody out to battle Goliath because they were scared. First of all, scared because there weren't supposed to be any more giants. And secondly, because if they lost, they would have to become servants to Goliath. So Goliath said, send me your champion. He called them cowards. Saul is looking worried. And there are like thousands of soldiers out there, but nobody is moving. Then you can hear someone call out, Goliath, and it's David. He stops, he prays and asks the Lord to give him the ground, every step of it, to be with him in that battle. And Goliath is looking like, is this a joke? I asked for a champion, and this is who y'all send to defeat me? A boy with a stick? So David started running towards Goliath, and Goliath started throwing spears at David. And this is where they kind of switched it up from the Bible, but 2 of the spears missed him, but the 3rd one caught him in the side. And then the narrator says, as the fate of the people hangs in the balance, I ask again, can one stone change the course of history? Then it takes us back 1 year earlier. But before we go back, a lot of people seem to have a problem with the spear scene. But for me, when I first watched it, I was like, I don't remember Goliath throwing spears. But then I watched that first episode like 3 times. And I was like, wait a minute. This is sort of a prelude of what's to come when Jesus was crucified. At least in my opinion, because Jesus was also pierced in his side. And not only that, when you look at that scene with David lying on the ground and the camera pans out, look at this right here and tell me over to the right, doesn't that look like Jesus on the cross? Y'all let me know. Let me know what you think. Tell me down in the comments. Okay, so now let's get back to the 1 year. Then we go back 1 year earlier, and we're in Bethlehem, the tribe of Judah. David, he out in the fields with the sheep, letting them graze, but then he hears the sheep crying out. And when he runs to see what's going on, one of the sheep have been attacked. And out in the distance, he can hear the roar of a lion. He's scared, but he preps his slingshot to attack. But when he stands back up, the lion is gone. So he carries the injured sheep home and puts him in the stable. He sees his dad telling the story to the family and some of the villagers. He was telling the story of Moses, and that Moses died on the mountain because of disobedience. Disobedience comes at a cost, even for a great one like Moses. So the little girl asks, what did Joshua do without Moses? And Jesse said that God told him 3 times to be strong and courageous. Do not fear. Fear is the enemy. Fear is the thief. And this is kind of like the theme for the first episode. And if you go back to Joshua chapter 1 verses 1 through 9, that's where you will find God telling Joshua to be strong and courageous. So then the little girl asks, well, why we still hiding then? And David chimes in and says, because his work isn't done. And that's when his brother Nathaniel notices that he was in the room, and he goes over there to basically be a pest, telling him that he saw him with the injured lamb. David let him know that the lion had returned, but Nathaniel, he didn't believe him. He was like, you were probably out there singing to your mama. And David didn't take kindly to that, and he let his brother know, keep my mama name out your mouth. And that's when Jesse was like, so is this story of our people boring or something? And Nathaniel apologized, and he said that he was distracted by the shepherd while squeezing David's shoulder. And David brushed him up off of him, so he got up and went outside. So he goes outside. He's washing the sheep's blood off of his hands. Ava, she was out there with him. That's his little sister. She is not in the Bible. At least she's not mentioned in the Bible. He has 2 sisters, but Ava is not the name. Okay, so she was like, poor lamb, but David let her know that it survived. And she looked over and she saw the harp and asked if Jesse knew he had that. But then Jesse walks up and tells Ava to go in the house, and he asks David, how many sheep did he lose this time? David said 4, and Jesse had to remind him that he wasn't rich, and they can't be losing food and money like that. But David had to let him know that the old king was back, and he was talking about the lion. Jesse said the lion was dead, but David reassured him that it was the old king, and that until they truly got rid of him, the sheep would never be safe grazing on that land. But Jesse reminded him that that was the only land that he could graze on. David suggested that they gather some men and hunt it down. But Jesse said, I tried, but they wouldn't come. And David feels like they wouldn't come because of him. He said that the people of Bethlehem and his brothers treat him like an outsider. He said that he was nothing more than a bastard in that house. Now, some people were wondering, why did David call himself a bastard, and did his brothers, treat him like a stepchild, like for real? Well, there isn't much mention about David's mom in the Bible. She was mentioned in Psalms 21, and in 1 Samuel 22, when David asked the king of Moab if he would let his mother and father stay there until he learned, what God would do for him. And that was when he was running from Saul. But if you ever read any of the Jewish stories from the Talmud, you've heard the story of Nizabeth, which is the name of David's mother. And her story, as far as it relates to how David was conceived, is very similar to that of Rachel and Leah's. And not only that, just like Tamar, the wife/widow of how she was rewarded for her silence, so was Nizabeth when she was blessed with David. So, according to Jewish stories, since Jesse's grandmother Ruth was a Moabite convert, he was uncertain of his true lineage. And since he was unsure, the law would not allow an Israelite to marry a Moabite convert. And since that was weighing heavy on him, he made the decision to separate from his wife, Nizabeth, who already had 7 kids with him now. All of the kids knew about the separation. So Nizabeth, she was devastated. After a few years had passed, Jesse decided he wanted a child. So he made plans to have a child with his maidservant, who was a Canaanite. Being that she was familiar with Nizabeth, the separation, her pain, and how badly Nizabeth wanted a child also, she went to her and told her to switch places with her on the night Jesse wanted to be with her. So Nizabeth prayed that the that their plan would work out. And it did. They switched places unbeknownst to Jesse because child, he was lit. And a few months later, Nisbet was pregnant with David. Her sons thought that she was out there committing adultery and they wanted to off her. So Nisbet did not want to embarrass Jesse by saying what really happened. And since Jesse never stopped loving her, he told his sons not to touch her and just let the son David be treated horribly. And when he grows up, he will not be able to marry an Israelite. And that's what happened. David was treated like an outcast. He was hated. His brothers didn't like him. The people in the village didn't like him. People felt that the sins of his great grandmother Ruth fell on him. And everyone despised the ground he walked on. If some came up missing, child, they'll blame David. Until he defeated Goliath and was anointed king. But that's going to come a little later. But that is in the Jewish tradition, the Jewish legend. That's the legend about David's mother. So back to the episode. So David feels like they need to go ahead and take care of that lion. He asks his dad to call in some reinforcement, but no one will come because they don't like David. Jesse, he didn't say that, but David knows it to be true. That's why he said his brothers mistreat him and he's nothing more than a bastard in the house. Jesse says, "You're my son," as they are. David kind of shrugged it off and he told his dad that he'll take care of the lion. So David started gathering his things, and that's when Jesse saw the harp. And Jesse said that he should have buried that harp along with David's mother. Now later on in the series, something's going to happen to David's mother, and that's just one of the creative aspects of the story, because in the Jewish legend, like the story, she is actually there when David is anointed king. But David said that's all he had left of his mom, so basically that wasn't gonna happen. So he leaves. Jesse tried to stop him, but he left anyway. So David goes out to the field and prays to the Lord to show him his purpose. Like, Lord, show me your will for me. Show me who David is supposed to be. So the next morning he wakes up, he starts strumming on the harp and having flashbacks of him singing and playing the harp with his mom when he was a little boy. Then we go over to the battle of the Amalekites. And that was the last great battle that they faced before Goliath. Saul was instructed by Samuel to not take anything from the Amalekites and to slay the Amalekite king Agag. All of this starts in 1 Samuel 15. So they won the battle against the Amalekites. Then Jonathan was informed that a border village was attacked. So they set off to Baal Hazor, the border village north of Bethlehem, to see what happened. They learned that the Philistines were the ones who attacked the village. They had never seen anything like that because the people of the village had been attacked in a heinous way, but not with a blade. Then you hear someone say, "Survivor!" And it was a kid, but he wasn't talking because the baby was in shock. So Jonathan asked them if he could tell him who did it, and the little boy had a flashback to giants attacking the village. So when Jonathan asked again who did it, the little boy pointed to a handprint on top of the house. Jonathan climbed the ladder to reach it. He put his hand inside of the print, and that handprint swallowed his hand. And Jonathan said there were giants on the earth in those days and also after. And this is in reference to the Nephilim. And you can find that verse in Genesis 6. So in the next scene, David is, he out in the fields practicing with his slingshot, and Jesse, his dad, comes out there. David thinks he's out there to get a count of the sheep, and he apologizes about the way he spoke to his dad the other night. And Jesse mentioned how David had a bold spirit like his mom. So David wanted to know, why did his dad keep him stuck in the fields? He wants to know, why couldn't he fight with Saul the way his brothers do? He said that he know he is meant for more because God speaks to him. But Jesse said that he wasn't going to let Saul take him too. And then they hear Abba screaming. David takes off running because he can also hear the roar of the lion. He makes it home, sees blood on the rocks, but then he finds Abba, pulls her to safety. Then Jesse comes in, sees the lion walking across the house. He slowly opens the door and the lion is standing at the top of the hill. And Jesse wanted to know, why was God judging him? But David, he is fed up. So he says that he's going to handle that lion. Jesse kept saying, "David, wait. Just wait." And David said that he was tired of waiting. So he was going to go take care of that lion once and for all. Then We go over there to the encampment that they built after the battle with the Amalekites. Jonathan brought the little boy back with him, and he's noticing that the people are acting weird. One man thanks him for filling his belly with the wines of Agag, but remember, they were not to take any spoils from the battle. So Jonathan finds his mom, and he takes the little boy to his mom, to Jonathan's mom. So his sister Michal, she picks him up while the other sister is worried about her getting her silks dirty. Even though the little boy didn't say anything the whole way there, when Michal asked him what was his name, he said Reuben. So she takes him off to get some fruit. Jonathan wanted to know where was his father Saul, and his mom said up on the mountain setting up a victory monument. And Eshbaal was up there too, that's his brother. Now Eshbaal was up there trying to get close with the servant girl, if you know what I mean. And she was trying to get close to him too, but first she wanted to know if he was going to be king one day. I was like, well, you might as well go be a Cassia girl. Then Jonathan, he walks in and letting his brother know that he missed the battle. But Eshbaal, he ain't about that fighting life. He just want to be a kept son. Jonathan looks around and says, so you are the one who convinced our father to keep those cursed objects from the Amalekite battle? Eshbaal, he didn't see a problem with it, and he said that his dad didn't object to it, so hey. The servant girl comes in, she lets Jonathan know that his dad is looking for him. So he goes up to the mountain, they greet each other. Saul shows him the monument he was building. It will be a memorial of all time to the greatest of their house, the glory of Israel. Jonathan says, like, you mean the glory, like, of God? The greatness of God? And Buns, our greatness is his greatness. And he walks off looking a little irritated because Saul is looking at it like we are the ones down here fighting and winning all these battles. See, Saul got the big head. He has forgotten about the anointing that was placed over his life, but Jonathan is trying to keep his family under that shield of protection by acknowledging God and everything that he has done and that he is doing for their family and the people. So then Saul asks about the border village. Jonathan tells him about the enormous handprint he saw, but Saul doesn't believe it's a Nephilim because giants hadn't roamed the lands in hundreds of years. He thinks that the Philistines were playing a trick on them in order to intimidate them. Jonathan is like, okay, let's hope you're right. But he still looks bothered. So his dad was like, you still look a little troubled. So he asked him, why were they keeping the spoils of the Amalekites and enslaving their people when Samuel told them not to keep anything? Saul said that the age of judges is over and it's the age of kings. Samuel's time is over. But Jonathan feels like they should still honor Samuel because he speaks for God. And Saul wants to know, why can't God speak to him? He's supposed to be anointed, right? God's anointed, so why won't he speak to me? And Jonathan says, yeah, anointed by Samuel. Saul doesn't really want to hear any of that. He was like, look, when you're a king, somebody always gonna be angry with you, okay? So who should I appease? The men of the 12 tribes who fought and died for us, or this one man? Jonathan is not in the mood for any politics, and life is politics, even more on the throne. So he looks everything Jonathan was trying to say to him and tells him to come on because we're about to go celebrate this victory. So then we go over to Ramah, the high place where Samuel is praying and crying out to God. He gets a vision of what Saul has done, and he tells his servant that they must go speak the words of God that were spoken to him and to undo what has been done. Now back over there with Saul, they're about to go into the party. When he enters, they start cheering and praising Saul as he approaches the throne. Adriel of Judah gave a speech and he thanked Saul for making them a nation, making them feared, and for making them wealthy with the spoils of the Amalekites. And then they pan the camera to King Agag, who was chained up at the table by Saul's feet. And while he was saying all of that, Jonathan is looking very disappointed, and he doesn't approve because Samuel made it very clear that they were not supposed to keep any of that stuff. So then Adriel says that The tribe of Judah renews their pledge to the anointed of the Lord Most High, to the house of Saul, king of Israel. May your reign endure for all generations. Saul thanked Judah for their loyalty, and he thanked his son for his courage, conviction, and his steadfast heart. He said that Jonathan would be greater than him. Eshbal seemed a little jealous and yelled out to Jonathan, "My brother, who's perfect in every way." And Saul was looking at him like, "Boy, don't start no mess up in here today, okay?" Alright now. So then it shows that David he had made it to the lion's den. He went in there, he called out for the lion, and they take us back over there to the party, right? So they had like a fighting match going on. So while that's happening, Abner asked Saul, why did the witch king Agag still live? The stuff that he's about doesn't belong here. Saul was like, he's right where he belongs, beneath my feet, powerless. And Abner tries to say more, but Saul cuts him off and says, I think you need wine. Relax. So while they're talking, Agag is down there on the floor doing some kind of sorcery, looking at Michal, and she gets real shooketh. And Abner walks over and kicks Agag's hand. And Michal, she leaves. And Abner tells Agag that his time is done. Now we're entering the part of the episode which can be found starting in 1 Samuel chapter 15 verses 22 through 33. So everybody at the party, they just feasting, laughing, talking. Saul is over there chopping it up with his boys. And when he looks up, he sees Samuel standing in the doorway. And this shocked him. Saul looked nervous because he was not expecting Samuel at that party. Everybody gets quiet because Samuel is that dude. So Samuel says that on the hill above this feast, I found a stela, which reads, to the glory of the house of Saul. He has defeated the Amalekites. May his fame reach every sea. May his throne endure for all generations. To the glory of Saul. The glory of Saul. Now Saul is feeling the way. So he plays it off and greets Samuel. He asks him if he came to sacrifice with them to celebrate. And Samuel says that he was there to speak the words that were spoken to him last night. Saul says that they have obeyed the words of the Lord and the Amalekites have been destroyed. Samuel is like, okay, but if that's true, why is the bleating of sheep and the lowing of cattle ringing in my ears? And most of all, why has Agag been brought in, polluting what is meant to be holy? And you can find it in 1 Samuel chapter 15 verses 13 through 14. So Saul tries to play it off again, but Samuel, he ain't budging. Then Saul whispers to Samuel to speak to him alone because he's starting to feel a little embarrassed in front of all those people. They go to Saul's tent and Saul wants to know, why isn't sacrificing thousands of men out in the field not enough? He felt like Samuel scolded him in front of the tribes of Israel and shamed him like a boy. So Samuel says he anointed a boy who was humble in his own eyes and that he wept for him all night. He pleaded with the Lord, but the Lord was not letting up on what he said and that he was going to have to speak the words of the Lord. Now Saul feels like Samuel is lying, that he's just jealous. Samuel says, I loved you like a son. Now mind you, he didn't say I love you. He said I loved with the D on it, like a son. Saul gets cocky and says, but yet your sons did not love you. They did not follow in your ways. But Samuel, he ignored all that and says that the Lord has said, I regret I made Saul king. He has turned his back on me and has not followed my command. Now, as he's saying all this, the weather has started to change. Storm clouds rolling in, it's thundering and lightning. Everybody looking around like, what in the world is going on? Because see, they weren't used to that type of weather. Jonathan runs outside and he sees Michal and she asked him, what have we done? Because they know something is not right. So Saul says to Samuel, I obeyed the voice of the Lord. I destroyed the Amalekites, chained Agag to my table like a dog. Samuel reminds him again that he was supposed to slay Agag, period. Then Saul goes into his eye rant. I built a kingdom. I did this. I did that. Samuel had to remind him that when he was small in his own eyes, it was the Lord who lifted him up and made him great. But now that he is great in his own eyes, he has rebelled and made himself evil in the eyes of the Lord. You twisted the throne of Israel to your own glory. So you will be given to a twisted power and your own torment. Your mind will be cursed. Saul called Samuel a sorcerer and told him to get out of his head. Samuel let him know, I am not a sorcerer. I am a messenger only. Then he starts to walk off. Saul grabs him and says that he was afraid of the people. He said that he kept back the best to sacrifice, but Samuel says to obey is better than sacrifice. Rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. Stubbornness is an iniquity and adultery. And Saul says again that he was afraid of the people. And Samuel wanted to know, why would you be afraid of the people? Why are you not afraid of God? And he says to Saul, I loved you. Loved. And he said, I anointed you. Now Saul wants Samuel to bless him. When a few minutes ago, he was all arrogant and cocky. He tells Samuel that he was a father to him and that he chose him to be king. Samuel says, no, God chose you to be king, and now he chooses another. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord your God now rejects you as king. His spirit is withdrawn from you. Then Samuel crosses his hands in front of Saul and wipes away the spirit of the Lord. The anointing that was over him is gone, just like that. So Saul says, this is my kingdom, and then my sons after me. He says that Jonathan was next in line to rule. But, that's never gonna happen. Samuel starts walking away and Saul grabbed the hem of his robe. And when Samuel pulls away, it tears. And he tells Saul that the Lord has torn the kingdom from you and given it to one greater than you. At that moment, Samuel started losing his mind. From his perspective, everything has turned gray and old. You got dust, spider webs everywhere. He's screaming out Samuel's name. Jonathan hear him yelling and he goes into the tent to see what's going on. Saul is pushing people away from him. Baby, he is having a nervous breakdown. Samuel tells Michal that he's sorry. He like, baby, I'm sorry, baby girl. And then he walks back into the party tent. He walked up to Agag, and Agag says, surely the wrath of Saul has passed. And Samuel says, it has, but not the wrath of God. And he destroys Agag. Now, while Samuel is over there with Saul slaying Agag, David is over there in the lion's den destroying the lion. So when Samuel is walking out of the tent, he says that God is not mocked. Now it's the next day and David has defeated the lion. Then it takes us back to the opening scene with Michal saying, so can one stone change the course of history? Yes, it can. But destiny comes at a cost, and the rise of David will cost my family everything. And that was the end of the episode. Okay? So let's go back to when God told Samuel what Saul had done. And this starts at 1 Samuel 15, chapter 15, verse 10. So this is the Bible part of it, okay? So then God spoke to Samuel. I'm sorry I ever made Saul king. He's turned his back on me. He refuses to do what I tell him. Samuel was angry when he heard this. He prayed his anger and disappointment all through the night. He got up early in the morning to confront Saul, but was told, Saul's gone. He went to Carmel to set up a victory monument in his own honor, and then he was headed to Gilgal. By the time Samuel caught up with him, Saul had just finished an act of worship, having used Amalekite plunder for the burnt offering sacrifice to God. As Samuel came close, Saul called out, God's blessings on you. I accomplished God's plan to the letter. Samuel said, so what's this I'm hearing? The bleating of sheep? This mooing of cattle? Only some Amalekite loot, said Saul. The soldiers saved back a few of the choice cattle and sheep to offer up in sacrifice to God, but everything else we destroyed under the holy ban. Enough, interrupted Samuel. Let me tell you what God told me last night. Go ahead, I'm listening. When you started out in this, you were nothing, and you knew it. Then God put you at the head of Israel, made you king over Israel. Then God sent you off to do a job for him, ordering you, go and put those sinners, the Amalekites, under a holy ban. Go to war against them until you have totally wiped them out. So why did you not obey God? Why did you grab all this loot? Why, with God's eyes on you all the time, did you brazenly carry out this evil? Saul defended himself. What are you talking about? I did obey God. I did the job God set me out to do. I brought in King Agag and destroyed the Amalekites under the terms of the holy ban. So the soldiers saved back a few choice sheep and cattle from the holy ban for sacrifice to God at Gilgal. What's wrong with that? But Samuel answered, what pleases the Lord more? What pleases the Lord more? Burnt offerings and sacrifices or obedience to his voice? It is better to obey than to sacrifice. It is better to listen to God than to offer the fat of sheep. Disobedience is as bad as the sin of sorcery. Pride is as bad as the sin of worshiping idols. You have rejected the Lord's command. Now he rejects you as king. Okay, look, I have sinned. I disobeyed the voice of the Eternal One and your instructions because I was afraid of the people. I listened to their counsel instead of yours. So now please pardon my sin and return with me so that I can worship the Eternal. Samuel said, I will not return with you because you have rejected the voice of the Eternal One. He has rejected your claims to rule Israel. He is through with you. As Samuel turned to leave, Saul grabbed at his priestly robe and a piece tore off. Samuel said, God has just now torn the kingdom from you and handed it over to your neighbor, a better man than you are. The Lord is the Eternal One of Israel. He does not lie or change his mind. He is not a human being, so he does not change his mind. I have sinned, but please do me this honor in front of the elders of Israel and all the people. Come back with me so that I may worship the Eternal One, your true God. Now see, Saul is still trying to perform for the people. He's still not getting it. But Samuel, he returned with Saul, and Saul worshiped the Eternal One. Samuel then completed what Saul had begun, meaning he went over there, he said, bring me Agag, the king of the Amalekites. So Agag they brought him to him, being cautiously optimistic that the worst had surely passed. But Samuel said, just as your sword has taken children from women, so will this sword make your mother a childless woman. So Samuel chopped Agag down to pieces in the presence of God right there in Gilgal. Samuel left immediately for Ramah, and Saul went home to Gibeah. Samuel had nothing to do with Saul from that point on. Though he grieved long, he loved him. He did love him. He told him that several times that he loved him, but he grieved long and deeply over him. But God was sorry still that he had ever made Saul king in the first place. Okay? Y'all get down in the comments. Let me know what you think about this first review recap of the first episode of House of David. Let me know if you want me to keep it all together or just review the episode and then come back and do a separate video connecting the Bible points to the episode. Okay? I hope y'all enjoyed this. Thank y'all for liking. Thank y'all for subscribing. I really appreciate when y'all hit that subscribe button. I really do appreciate it. I will talk to y'all later.